you hear that little beep noise every now and then, we have people that are joining us on Zoom online. And we have people watching online, I believe. So apparently there's a lot of ways that you can watch this. And some of them I didn't even know about and didn't know there were as many that were watching it as there are. But there are. Now, last week, because we had a lot of people here that were like guests from the 2-week ministry school, last week I went over notes of kind of a background of why we read and are doing our best to live by Torah, which we learned was a word that means what? What does that word mean? Torah. God's instructions, okay? And, you know, when you use that word rather than using the word law, it's like, that's a big deal. Realizing, because when you use language like, well, we're not under the law, but then if you realize don't use the word law, use God's instructions. Would you make a declaration, well, we're not under God's instructions? No, because we are, okay? And they're in the whole Bible. They begin in Genesis, they end in Revelation, and they're everywhere. So it isn't only the New Testament that gives us our ways of life. Now, for those of you that are new to this, what we have been doing every year for the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, is in Jewish life, all right, Torah is broken up over a whole year into readings every week. So you read a little bit of it every week. And then when they meet together in their worship and their readings and things like that, they will read and study what they have read that week. And then the next year, you begin it all over again. So every year in a synagogue, they study Torah, all of it, every year. That doesn't mean they don't add other things in, because they do. And you've noticed that we add other things in as well, all right? But that's what we've been doing. And tonight, there are 2 readings that we're going to go over. And that happens sometimes in the readings. Sometimes you'll get a couple of them that we'll do at once. Sometimes during the holy days, there are readings that go off the map of Torah readings, and they'll go and read a little bit from Isaiah and read something else. So anyway, I hope that kind of explains where we are and what we're doing. Okay? And the word parashah means portion. That's the portion that we are reading from Torah. This week there are 2 of them, all right? And they get their names from the words at the very beginning of the reading, okay? So these readings that we're going to look at tonight are Kedoshim, that means holy ones, all right? And Emor, which means speak, from the verb amar. All right? So we're going to look at those readings, and in the middle of it, we're going to go on a little rabbi trail into another overview of God's holy days, the ones that are in the Bible. You may know them as feasts of the Lord. So we'll be looking at those. All right? You all right with that? Good? Okay. All right. Now, in Leviticus, we are dropping in on the middle of a group of instructions in Leviticus that are all about what it means to live a life that is holy, and what that means. Now, holiness is not something that you earn, okay? Holiness is something that you are. You either are or you are not, okay? And the only one that gives you the identity as holy is God, okay? So if he looks at you and goes, you are holy, which is what he did way back in Exodus. Remember when he brought Israel out of Egypt and he said to them, you are to be to me a nation of holy people, right? Okay, that doesn't mean they're all going, wow, how are we going to earn that? No, you don't earn that. That's what God says you are. So we need to remember what it means to be holy. It means that you're not like everything else, okay? If I, in my house, let me see how I would, because we don't have a china cabinet with all of the good dishes and things like that in it, but some of you do. But you don't use that every week or every day, do you? You use that when? Thanksgiving, things like that, all right? That means that those dishes are holy, okay? They're unique. They're only used for whatever, okay? That's what it means to be holy. It means that you are unique and you're only to be used for God's work, okay? Now, there is a way that we are instructed as those who are holy. There's a way to live, okay? There's a way to live and there's a way not to live, all right? If you are going to live as holy, then go back and read Leviticus 18, 19, and 20, and there's like a breakdown of lists of the way that we act in life as those that are unique and not like everybody else, okay? That's what you have in your notes, right there in the beginning of your notes, okay? Holy people live in sexual purity. And then there's a list, okay, about what that means. I know there's a movement in, not only in our world and in the U.S., but there's a movement in Christianity that is doing away with a lot of this, okay, with the argument, well, we're not under the law, so it doesn't matter. So that means that, it says right in Leviticus, it speaks of a man lying with another man like a man lies with a woman, okay? And you know what that means. So it's right there in Leviticus, and the argument that is used that homosexuality is all right is the argument, well, that's in Leviticus, that's in the law, and we're not under the law. See how it creeps in to everything, even in things that, 50 years ago you would not have imagined that anybody would have believed that. And yet that's what people believe, okay? And the idea of getting rid of the law or Torah leads us to have no law, okay? What is that what is that government that has no law? Anarchy, lawless. Everybody does whatever is right in their own eyes, and it doesn't matter what you do to anybody else. That is not the way holy people live, okay? So on this list, I'm not going to read everything on the list because you can read those, but I'll read the major headings and maybe say something about some of these. Holy people honor their parents and elders. Okay, that means that one of the instructions is that we are to stand up or rise in the presence of our elders. Okay? And I noticed I'm here standing up, but none of you are standing up in the presence of your elders. What that means is when somebody in the family or whatever walked into the room, if they were one of the elders, then everybody in the room stands up to honor them. I think that's really neat. The older I get, the more neat it is. But, I grew up in Florida, all right, which is like a little bit of southern world down there. It's a little bit like Georgia, but not as much. It's like the end of Georgia that goes down into the water, right? But one of the things that I learned to this day is if I'm going to eat, and we're going to be wherever, and we're going to eat, and the woman or the wife or the mother or whatever is in here getting everything ready, I will go behind the chair and wait. I don't just go sit right down. I wait. So we wait till the mother comes into the room, and then whenever mom gives the signal, then we sit down. Okay? It's a little bit like that with this idea about honoring those that are our elders. Okay? In this, in Leviticus, we learned that we, holy people, we worship the Lord His way, not our way. Okay, that's a very big matter, because I don't know how often I have heard, well, that isn't the way I like to worship. And I always want to ask, what does what you like have to do with it? How is that relevant? This is not about what you like. This is about a way of worshiping God. And I don't mean music. I'm not speaking of your preference in music, but I am speaking about these things that are listed under how to worship His way. One of them is that we keep His Shabbats. Did you know that that's worship? When we keep Shabbat, we are worshiping Him. We worship Him by the way we eat. Okay, those are all acts of worship. Worship in modernity is about music, mainly, right? When you hear the word worship, oh, I love to worship. What does that mean? That means I love to make music and raise my hands. I love to make music and raise my hands, but I know that the word worship in Hebrew does not mean make music and raise your hands. Okay? Does anybody know the word for worship in Hebrew? Avodah. 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 And it means work. It means your work. Okay? Whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that your hands are doing, the work that you are doing, the service that you are doing, that's worship. An element of that might be making music. Okay? They made music in the Bible, and that's awesome. That's great. But what can happen is we end up with these little boxes in our life, and there's the God box, which is about making music to the Lord. Now I'm worshiping. Okay? That's not the Bible view of worship. The Bible view of worship is that every area and every action of our lives is a way to worship Him. I think that's amazing. That's neat. Okay? When I learned, because one of the things that I love to do is read. I love to read, and I love to do background research, all of that. I love history. I love all of that. When I learned that study is one of the highest ways to worship God, I was like, yeah, that's really good. Okay? All right. Uh, those of us that are holy people, we care for the needy. Okay? That begins right in our own families, and then that goes out into our whole community. All right? And by community, I mean us, y'all in the room, whatever your community is. And then it goes out and even includes the world. Okay? But it is like this diagram, picture here, okay? In the middle of it is me and my family. Going out in the next level is me and my community of believers that I'm in, and then going out into the world. But in that way, there are literal laws or instructions in Torah. For example, if you had a field and you were going to go reap your harvest, you were not allowed to reap all of it. Okay, you had to leave like around the edges. You had to leave whatever it is that you were growing, you had to leave it there so that those who were needy could eat. So I think that's an amazing instruction that is given there, okay? And holy people love others. And by love, I do not mean the feeling of love. I mean the actions of love. Okay? Those of us that belong to Yehovah, we are learning how to be honest, how to judge righteously, how to not gossip or speak ill or evil of others. We learned that a couple weeks ago in one of the readings. Did you know that in Leviticus, where it's all about the disease that's like a rash, okay, in modern English versions, what word do they use? Leprosy, which is the wrong word. It's not leprosy. It's not even that in Hebrew. In Hebrew, it's the word zara'at. Zara'at. And it means it was a rash that nobody knew what it was. All right? And in Judaism, the belief was, and I believe that this is right, that those who got the rash, Zara'at is known as a mark. Okay? You were given the mark of Zara'at. And the reason you were giving that is speaking evil of others. Okay? And the name in the reading, the Torah reading, a couple of weeks ago, the name Metzorah, which is the reading about those who have this mark of Tzarat. The word Metzorah in Hebrew is from two words that means evil speaker. So there you go. So where do you have an example, like a glaring example of somebody in Torah that had Zarat? Miriam. Why did Miriam get Zarat? She grumbled against Moses. Okay? So there's a good background and foundation to the idea of why that happens, all right? Which is one of the reasons why our words and what we speak about others matters. Even others that we do not like or we do not agree with. Okay, I can give you one glaring example right now. That would be, but I'm not going to go there. Okay, that doesn't mean that you are forbidden from being honest. Okay, that's not what that means. There's a difference in being honest and being a gossip and a busybody and somebody who says things that are hateful and mean. Okay, all right. You poor guys that have been here every day for the last 2 weeks, from early in the morning, and now you're here, and you're still here. Okay? Just slap yourself. All right? You'll be all right. We'll make it. Okay, now we're going to move on out of that idea of holiness and what they do. And what we do is we just lift certain verses out of the reading and then go over them a little bit, because there are things in there where there's a lot of meat, all right? So in 21:1, Leviticus 21:1, you read, Adonai said to Moses, speak to the priests, the sons of Aaron, and tell them. The next however many verses are all about instructions for priests. Okay? And as you are reading Torah instructions, you need to know and you need to ask, is that one for me? Because they're not all. How many are there? 613? Okay? They're not all yours. You can't do all of those. A lot of them are for women or men. It's one or the other. A lot of them are priests. Some of them are only when you're living in Israel. All right? So these are those that are for priests, and here's an outline of those instructions. All right? Number one, they're not to defile themselves with a dead body, unless it is like their closest of relatives. Okay? Secondly, they are not to make bald spots or cut the edges of their beards or cut their flesh. Well, why would anybody do that? Did they do it back then? Yes, they did. Where did they do that? Where did they cut themselves? In Egypt? And in other ancient cultures, they did it when they were mourning. Okay? Something else they did when they were mourning is they marked their bodies with ink. Okay? And sometimes they would cut their bodies and then mark their bodies with ink. Well, we have a different word for that, right? What is it? Tattoo. It's ancient. That's nothing new, okay? But the priests were not allowed to do that, okay? What else? They're not to marry women who are defiled or divorced, okay? They must only marry a virgin from their own people, and they must not have tsarat, which means they must not be bad mouths, okay? Now, all of these are ways that are separating the worship that Israel does from the worship that other pagan nations do. A lot of what you read in Torah is about how we are not going to be like the other nations and the way that they worship and the things that they do. Okay? Yehovah, in more than one instruction, he writes about mixture. Okay? One example is mixing seeds in your field. Okay? You're not supposed to do that. The other one is about mixing linen and wool. And you're not supposed to do that. All right? And there are other mixtures that are not allowed. And you might wonder, well, why? Why does he write, don't mix linen and wool? Well, there is an electromagnetic reason, believe it or not. But there's another reason that goes even deeper than what's on the surface. How many of you know that when you're reading the Bible from Hebrew with Hebrew eyes, there are a lot of different levels of meaning in scriptures, all right? The ultimate meaning of do not mix is do not mix the way that you worship me, Yehovah, with the ways that the other nations worship their gods. Okay? Can we take a little bit of a trail away from that here so that I can bring something up? Thank you. You're not going to like it, but I'll bring it up anyway. Do you know that if you read the background and the history of Christianity, which I think that 99% of us would argue, yes, that is my religion. Christianity is my religion and my background. Well, do you realize that the very beginning of our religion, if that is the one you're naming your religion, was not Jesus? Okay? Jesus was not a Christian. Jesus was what? Jew. Okay? Paul was not a Christian, nor did he found a new religion. He wasn't the founder of a new religion. He was a Jew that believed Yeshua was Lord and Messiah, and he went around to all of his Jewish friends and to Gentiles trying to introduce Yeshua as Lord and Messiah. Okay? But he never left being Jewish. You can learn that by simply reading the book of Acts, okay, and reading the book of the letters, okay, like Philippians. And it's obvious, wait a minute, he never gave up any of this Jewish things, all right? No, he didn't. The religion of Christianity was created hundreds of years later by Roman believers in Jesus mixing their religion with pagan religions that had been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Told you wouldn't like it. Okay? So what that means is there are worship practices that go on in Christian churches that originated in paganism. And nobody knows it because nobody asks, because nobody reads Torah. And nobody reads in Deuteronomy where he says, do not worship me like the other nations worship their gods. Yes, question. Say it real loud. Or I could give you a mic. No, yeah, I got it. Can I give an example? Yes, I can give a lot of examples. Do I want to give an example? Maybe not. All right, here's an example. All of us believe in the resurrection. Amen? Everybody in the room believes in the resurrection. You believe that Jesus, Yeshua, was raised from the dead. He is alive right now. He is at the right hand of the Father. He gives us and pours out the Holy Spirit so we can have a connection with Him. Yes, 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 yes. All of that, all right? But if you don't read the Gospels closely enough, and if you haven't read Torah closely enough, then you will end up believing that Jesus died on Friday, was buried, and raised from the dead on Sunday, and then we're going to give that a name, and the name is Easter. It's not in the Bible, okay? It is in other pagan religions where they did that, all right? Now that you know that, if you didn't already know that, and I think everybody in the room probably knew that, but now that you know that, now you have to deal with that, not me. So it's in your lap, right? Because it is something to deal with. Because we have relatives that are Bible-believing Christians, and they're good, and they're decent, and they want to live right, and they don't lie, and they don't believe in adultery and things like that. But if you bring up some of these ideas, they don't like it. Okay, they can get very angry, and maybe they're not used to being convicted. Or what difference does it make? Right. It only makes a difference if you read Torah and if you realize that Yeshua did not come to delete Torah. He pretty bluntly said that, right? Sermon on the Mount. Don't even let it enter your mind that I'm here to do away with Torah. I am not. Okay? So, and there's a lot of other places like that in the New Testament where I could just point to them. And but if you have a lens on that you have learned since you were born again or all of your life, if you grew up in Christianity, you have that lens, and that lens has doctrines in it. Doctrines are beliefs. I told you this is a rabbi trail. Doctrines are beliefs, and they are beliefs that are propositions. Do you know what I mean by that? Okay, I believe X, Y, and Z about this. I believe this about Jesus. I believe this about God. I believe this about the Holy Spirit. I believe this about church. I believe, and you have a whole list of them, and they're doctrines. And if you want to join most of churches, if you want to join one, then what you do is you go to a class where you learn all of these doctrines, and then you agree with them. Right here. It's all mental. Okay? It's all about what you believe in your mind. That is not the Hebrew way or the Bible way. The Hebrew way is about what you do, how you behave, how you relate to one another. That doesn't mean there's no beliefs in there. There are beliefs in there, but they are small in comparison to the number of beliefs in normal Christianity. Okay, if you had a had a book of theology, okay, Christian theology books, maybe like this, okay, they are divided up into these beliefs. Who is God? Who is Jesus? What is salvation? What is yada, 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 on down the line. If you look at a Jewish theology book, guess how it's divided up? Torah, prophets, writings. Period. Okay? In other words, the Jewish theology book is Bible. The Christian theology book is philosophy. And a lot of the philosophy has been mixed with Greek philosophy. Okay? The whole way that we divide up our theology is not Bible, it's philosophy. Okay? Which is interesting because Paul, when he was writing the Colossians, he said, do not let these others with their vain philosophy influence you. And he was using the word and the ideas, don't let the Greek philosophers influence you, because you know what you believe. That's where in Colossians you get into the whole, he writes about what you eat and whether or not you are keeping certain days and all of that. And sometimes people use that to argue that the law is no longer valid. Right? Do you know where I mean in Colossians? Where he says, why? Don't let anybody judge you about keeping certain days or Sabbaths or, a couple of other things in the list. And the way that that's normally read is, see, I don't need to do Sabbath. Shabbat is not one of the things I need to do anymore. Read the rest of the letter. Okay? The letter is obviously written to those that were pagans. Now they are following Jesus, Yeshua, and they are learning to walk and live in his ways. And their Roman neighbors are putting pressure on them because they're not celebrating the old holidays to Zeus and Apollos and Diana. Okay? Instead, they're doing these Sabbaths. So he writes and says, don't let anybody judge you about doing Sabbaths. So that means that the way that we have read Colossians, it will be, and I believe it is, the exact opposite of what it meant. And you can read about it in your Christian theology book. It's exactly the opposite. Okay? Whoa! That's a big deal. Now, this doesn't happen just because one day I thought, well, I'm going to pick up the Jewish lens or the Hebrew lens and read it that way. It's just simple Bible study, folks. All you got to do is read it, study it, begin to ask. Begin to ask this: to whom was this written? What was going on in the community where it was written? When was it written? Who wrote it? Okay, what was that individual's background in life? When you begin to ask those questions, the Bible comes alive. Okay, and a lot of what we have learned in the doctrines begins to kind of move. All right, is it all right to do that? Is it all right to believe something different now than you did 10 years ago? If it isn't, then, why are you here? We're here because we want to learn. Learning is about growing. Sometimes, gee, I didn't know I was going to get this. Sometimes learning is unlearning. Okay? And unlearning is not easy. Not easy at all. If you learn how to drive on a 3 on the tree, anybody know what that is? Yeah, me too. It's the way I learned to drive. And now you're going to drive, an automatic, whatever. It's like it's a different world. Well, the person driving the automatic, make them go back and drive what you learned to drive on and see what happens. I don't know what to do, right? Okay? It's like that with growing in your relationship with God. You got to hold on to a lot of those doctrines loosely and allow the Holy Spirit to move them around if he needs to do that. And this may bother people that know you. Well, don't talk about the doctrines with them. Don't jam them. Don't. Here's a word of advice. Don't take what you're learning and go jam it down everybody else's throat. That's not going to work. Okay, any more than it would work the other way around. Okay, speaking of doctrines, can we look at the idea of divorce and remarriage? I'm just going to look at Jim from now on. Okay, I don't know what you have learned. I don't know what doctrine you have learned about divorce and remarriage. I know that I had a run-in. I had a run-in with a guy who was a church leader who wanted to argue with me why, I don't know, I'm a nice enough guy, but wanted to argue with me because I believed that it was all right if a woman was divorced, she could get remarried. And his view was, no. Once you are divorced, you are never allowed to get remarried, because if you do, you are committing adultery. Okay? Now, on the one hand, without even looking at the Bible, I could go, that's bizarre. Who would do that? Would God really do that? But all you have to do is look at the words and do a little background on the words. And you're going to find out there's more than one word that means divorce. Okay? So you have to ask, which divorce does that word mean? Okay? So that's what I've written here, the next bit of notes that are there. All right? So here's the way, at least I believe it works. God has an ideal. Okay? He has an ideal for humanity. It's presented in the very beginning in Genesis. Okay? His ideal for humanity is that we would walk with him, that we would not, that we would obey him, Shema, listen to him, that we would not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? And do you know what that means? Eating of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil means you make your own decisions. That's what that means. Okay? In other words, I'm going to be the one who is the judge of what is right and wrong. That's eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? God is the only one who is the ultimate judge of what is right and what is wrong. My ideal in life is line my life up with his judgment of what is right and what is wrong, not make up my own rules, because that's what happened in the garden, okay? But in the ideal, there's a man and a woman, and the man and the woman come together. It's in Genesis 2, verse 24. This is why a man is to leave his father and mother and stick with his wife, and they are to be, what's the Hebrew word? Echad. They are to be one flesh. That's his ideal. Then there's the real world. Okay? What's beautiful and gorgeous about Torah is Torah realizes the real world and makes instructions about what happens when you get in real world messes. Okay? So the ideal is that a man and a woman would come together, that they would learn to work and live together in unity, in echad, as one, and that what God joined together, no man would divide. That's the ideal. The reality is that doesn't happen very much. Okay? The reality in the days that Torah was written and being lived was that men had unfortunately adopted some of the practices of other cultures around them where the women were like property. And you'll read in Torah that, I'm kind of getting out of order with my notes because I don't just want to read my notes, but in Deuteronomy 24, you read, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand, sends her out from his house, and she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. In other words, in Torah, if you were a woman and your husband gave you a divorce, a certificate, you could go out and get another husband. All right? Later on, the religious leaders are going to be grilling Yeshua about this verse and this question, okay? Because they're going to ask about marriage, and he's going to give them an answer. But if you read his answer without knowing this verse from Deuteronomy, why it was given, what it means, okay, and you don't know the different words for divorce, then it's easy to believe that Jesus doesn't allow a woman to remarry if she's been divorced, okay? One of the words that we in most English Bibles translate as divorce is a word that means put away. All right? The practice of putting away was when a man would look at the woman, the wife, and basically say, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Get out of my house. I'm done with you. It's over. Okay, here's your bags, by the door. Why? Well, you burned my dinner. Which, by the way, in Jewish law, all right, in the Jewish oral law that the religious leaders in Yeshua's day believed in and espoused one of the laws was you could put your wife away or divorce your wife if she burned your dinner. Okay? That's what, if you, the man, find something in the woman that you don't like, displeases you, you can give her a certificate of divorce. But what are you not allowed to do? Put her away. How are those different? Divorce certificate. That's how they're different. If you do not have a divorce certificate and you're a woman and you go out and you marry another man, you are what? Committing adultery. According to the legal paperwork, you're committing adultery. Yeshua says that. He says, don't do that. Okay? In Torah, the man is commanded to give the woman a divorce certificate so that she can go out and get married again. Why would that matter? And why isn't it written to the man if the woman divorces the man? Why isn't that in there? Okay? This is the words of the religious leaders, why did Moses then write that a man could divorce his wife? Okay? And what was Yeshua's answer in that? The hardness of your hearts. Who is the your? The religious leaders. Because the religious leaders were bringing in a woman and marrying the woman, and when they got tired of that woman or found another that looked better, they would bring that woman in and marry that woman. Then they would take the other one, put the other one out, or divorce the other one. And Yeshua is saying, stop doing that. That's not God's ideal. That's not the way that it works, right? So, but if I go back to Moses, then I have to ask, why did God give that permission to the man to divorce his wife? Okay? Now remember, the man views the woman as property. Okay? So if the man is not pleased with his wife, what's going to happen? No, I mean, what if he's not allowed? What if he's not allowed to divorce his wife? Then what's going to happen to her? She's going to get beaten, or she's going to get abused in one way or another, or she's going to get neglected, or she's not going to get to eat with the rest of the family. Okay? It's all a matter of the hardness of the men's hearts, okay, is the reason why that permission was given, and it was given that you better give her a certificate of divorce so she can go out and find another husband. It was very important in those days that a woman have a husband. Okay? Not only as a covering, but when she was kicked out of the house, she had no money. She may have had no way to make a living. If a woman had no way to make a living, then how would a woman make a living? That's an example, to be a prostitute. Oh, you mean the woman being able to leave the man? Well, where is that in Torah? It's not. Yes, that's right. You're right. Okay, yes. Divorce, yes. Putting away is a different word than divorce. Okay? Different Hebrew word. The word divorce, as in Malachi, where you read, I hate divorce, says the Lord, is the word putting away. I hate putting away. What's the word? Shalak. I hate putting away. Okay? Does that mean God doesn't hate divorce? Well, there's one example in the Bible of a divorce. God did it. Okay? So if anybody has the idea that divorce is like the unforgivable sin, then you're going to have to go to God, because he gave the example, because he divorced Israel. All right? The good news is he had a way to bring Israel back, which is a whole nother road. That's exactly right. That a bride can be remarried. That's exactly right. Okay? Yes. Ah. Well, that might be the level 1 of it. But I believe it goes down to a much deeper level, that it's a matter of values and direction and purpose in life. Okay, that's what it means to be one. Because there are people that are married that live together and their values are not lined up, but they have babies. That doesn't mean they're one. That doesn't mean they're echad, as it's written that they're meant to be. So that's what I think. Ah, yeah. Well, listen, dividing marriage I do not recommend it, if that makes any sense. That doesn't mean that I've never recommended it. Okay, if there's a situation where there's abuse and all of that going on, then I recommend it. Yes? Okay. James is asking, for those of you online, what was going on with Joseph and Mary when it's that Joseph wanted to dismiss Mary privately. Why? Because he was righteous. Okay? Wow. There's a whole lot there, but that's a really good question. Okay? In a Hebrew marriage, okay, when you were, we would use the word betrothed, okay, you were as good as married. But the act of consummation had not happened yet, okay? Often the time of a betrothal, an engagement, would be as much as a year, okay? During that year, certain things would happen, and gifts would be given, and agreements would be made between families and the husband-to-be and the wife-to-be and all that. Okay, so Miriam and Joseph were in that state of being married. They were betrothed, but they weren't yet. They had not yet had the consummation of the marriage. In the Jewish culture, if you were betrothed, then you were engaged. The only way to get out of it was with a divorce. That's how serious it was to be engaged, all right? And in the, I believe in the oral laws that they had, there were options of what one could do if they wanted to get unengaged, or worse, if one of them was had committed adultery. Okay? So when you read that about Joseph, Joseph is under the belief that Miriam has committed adultery because she's going to have a baby, right? Right? So Joseph goes a little while believing that, wow, she was not faithful to me. Now, he has options right there. One of his options, which would probably be the most, the road most traveled, would be bring her out in front of everybody, subject her to a public humiliation for being an adulteress, the penalty for which is death. Okay? But he did not do that. He opted to do it very quietly. Okay? Send her on her way. I'm not going to shame her in any way. And when Luke wrote about that, he wrote that the reason was he was righteous, or Matthew and Luke. The reason was He was a righteous man. A righteous man is a tzaddik. Tzaddik. That's not one, that doesn't mean that he walked around with a checklist of the rules and checked them all off. That means he was like Noah and Abraham and David and Yeshua. He was a righteous man. He did what was right, and that was what was right to him in that circumstance. And then, of course, he got the word from the angel. So, good question. Yep. Okay, now, putting away your wives without giving them a divorce is illegal. Okay, and when you do it, you put her and you in a position of adultery for any future relationships because you have not properly divorced. However, don't get the idea that that means, divorce is God's will. It's not. His ideal, remember his ideal? His ideal is his will. But this is the best way I could say it. He makes allowances in order to bring a greater level of possibility for redemption down the road. He makes allowances, and there's even allowances in Torah. Yes? No. Sorry. It does not, but that doesn't mean that it's undoable or that you should not do it. You have to remember, in that day, all right, it was the men who, in their view, owned the women. Okay? So that commandment in Torah about giving a divorce certificate was specifically for her own protection, basically, for her protection. There's not a law that forbids it, a woman getting a divorce. David. A couple instances where a man cannot divorce his wife, like Yep. Yes. Well, I thought that was an either or. Either he's got to marry her or he's got to give the $50,000 to the dad. Right. Yes. Aha. Yes. Find out that. There you go. So, who'd want to stay with a guy like that? Yeah, I know. I know. Depends on how much money he has. Come on. Thinking there is. So, okay, let's move on from that. And remember that God's ideal is the ideal. And by the way, one of the things that helps greatly in marriage is realizing the ideal and going back and reading about it and finding out what it means. What does it mean to be the woman, and what does it mean to be the man? Where do you find that? Genesis 2. It's all in there. Look up the meanings of the words. Okay, look up the meaning of the word woman and the word man and the word one and the word that the woman is the, what is the woman? He created the woman to be what? Helpmate. Okay, look up those words. Doesn't mean helpmate. It means something else. So go look them up. You'd be amazed. It's a lifesaver. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. Just a concordance. You guys have those, don't? A concordance, right? Strong's or something like that. You can look at a Blue Letter Bible. If you have a Bible app, you can look them up. I use Olive Tree, and I can hit a word if I have, and I do this in the NAS and the ESV and the New James, a couple other versions, put my finger on the word, and it brings up the Hebrew, and it brings up the Hebrew meaning. And sometimes it brings up some other words, because it'll have a word, and then it'll have the root word of that word. So go back and look at the root word, because in Hebrew they're all related. Okay, every word that has a root, you want to go all the way back to the root and figure out what that means. Okay, and then if you really want to get into it, you can go to the Ancient Hebrew Research Center.org, and the guy that runs that has taken every word out of Strong's and given a Hebrew meaning, and you can learn the meaning of the ancient Hebrew pictographs for certain words. And that gives you even more depth of meaning. Okay? So, and if anybody needs help with any of that, just come talk to me later. I can send you there. Okay? All right, moving on in our reading. Leviticus 21, we have Adonai saying again to Moses, tell Aaron, none of your descendants who has a defect may approach to offer the bread of God. Okay? The bread of his God. So these commandments or these instructions are only for priests. And they're only about the priest doing an element of the service in the tabernacle. Okay? And if a priest had any of this list of defects, then they were not allowed to do that service in the tabernacle. How many of you know or heard of Mark Biltz from El Shaddai? He has a great teaching on this section of Scripture where he looks at every one of the defects that are there, and he gives you a deeper meaning, okay, of what these were about. That these were not only physical, but spiritual as well, okay? And so I have a list of these defects and then what they might mean in a more spiritual meaning of them. So there's blindness, there's being lame, disfigured, deformed, crippled foot, crippled hand, hunchback, dwarf, eye defect, rash, scabs, damaged testicles, and come on. That's it. Okay? Blindness is mentioned all over the New Testament. Okay? People who are blind to the realities of God. Blind to who Yeshua was. There are blind minds, blind hearts. Yeshua called the religious leaders blind guides, okay, because they didn't know where they were going. In Revelation, he says there's a blind church. There's blinding bitterness and blind ungodliness. So all of those are the ideas of blindness, okay? Blindness in those ways will keep you from being devoted to Yehovah, all right? Then there's lame, okay? Lame is the idea of this, okay? And that means that your walk is unequal. Your legs are unequal. And believe it or not, our God is a God of equality in justice, okay? Equal justice under the law is a provision of Torah. So you read in Leviticus 19, do not be unjust in judging. Show neither partiality to the poor nor deference to the mighty, but with justice judge your neighbor. Okay? That's not judging like, hey, you neighbor, you did that. That's not the judging that he means. He means the judging like in a court of law. Okay? For it to be equal. All right? Lame. The next is disfigured, which literally means having a flat nose. Okay? Meaning you can't smell. Smelling has the idea of discerning. Okay? Mark Pilch says it means you have no spiritual discernment, which means you don't know the difference between right and wrong. Deuteronomy 32, you read about a nation, which will be Israel. They are a nation without common sense, utterly lacking in discernment. If they were wise, they could figure it out and understand their destiny. Okay? Then you have deformed, which in the Hebrew word has the idea of something grown out. All right? Something that is added, something that is not belong to be there. All right? Like we say in Florida. You're not belong to be there. All right? And isn't it interesting that in Deuteronomy you read, in order to obey the mitzvot of Adonai your God, which I am giving you, do not add to what I am saying and do not subtract from it. Okay? Here's something amazing. Just think about this. This is about religions. Do you guys hear a high-pitched noise? Whew, thank God. I thought there was some going on in my ears. I'm like, what in the world? All right. I think it's the air conditioner fan. Okay, think about this. Christianity takes away from Torah when it says you're not under the law. Okay? It removes from it in exact disobedience to Deuteronomy. Judaism adds in exact disobedience to Deuteronomy. Okay? So if you guys are thinking, because Jesus was Jewish and we're looking at these Jewish backgrounds and Jewish roots, that Judaism is better, nope. Okay? Both of them are man-made religions. One of them removes away from God's laws. The other one adds to God's laws. So in Judaism, rather than having 3 basic commands about Shabbat, you have 100 or more. Okay? Like how far you can walk. Yeah. Sure. Come on up. Let me turn it on. There you go. Okay.
So are you saying the only true religion is Hebrew?
No. Well,
Is it a religion?
I don't know if I would use that word.
That word?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Religion is mentioned in the book of James, right? That's the only where it's mentioned, basically, in the Bible, in the book of James, where he says true religion is what? Caring for orphans and widows and keeping yourself unstained by the world. Okay? That's, if you want to use the word religion, that's the religion of Torah, which is Hebrew religion. What happens is, I guess, and this is kind of a philosophy statement, I guess, which is what I began as and then moved into being more Hebrew. Okay? That religion is a man-made way of getting to God or getting to heaven. Okay? It's man-made. The religion of Judaism and the religion of Christianity are both man-made. People got around in a room and had discussions and philosophies and voted, and then they wrote it down. And then they handed it down. And then they do it again, and then they do it again, and then they do it again, and they add more, and they remove more, and they add more, and they remove more, and then you have a religion. And then you have a religion like Christianity that has in the world over 40,000 denominations. Okay? And every one of those denominations has a little different look or a little different list of what they're supposed to believe and how things are supposed to work. Okay? I remember when I ran into this when I learned that there were, I couldn't believe this, but true, there were whole denominations built on the way that you immerse somebody who's being baptized, whether you leaned them back or leaned them forward. There were arguments about that, and whole denominations built on that. And we wonder why the world looks at our religions and goes, you guys are nuts. Why? Because sometimes we are. And things like that are. Relationship is what Hebrew religion is about. It's about a relationship with the creator of the universe, all right? And relationships with one another. That's what it's about, okay? It's not real big on making boxes of beliefs. It's real big on how you treat your neighbor and how you treat your creator. So when there are things that are written, okay, I'll use this as an example, and I don't mean to like convict any of you guys or come down on anybody where you are. I don't know where you are in your beliefs or your walk. But where I was in my walk, my wife and I, in our walk, a few years ago now, is we were, I don't know about these food laws, okay? Because over here in Mark, you have this scripture where it's written, thus Jesus declared all foods clean. Okay, and then I learned there's a couple of different ways of looking at that, all right? And then some of the others in Paul's writings, and I'd look at them and I'd be like, I just don't know. And I am admitting to you, I love to eat. I love to eat meat. Okay, I loved to eat all meat. I used to love, from where I was born and raised in Florida on the Gulf, if you removed it out of the water and it was a living whatever, eat it. Right? And I liked it all, man. All right. But one day I was praying and I was asking God, what is it about these food laws? Because I learned about there was a diet 20 years ago or maybe more, I don't know, where it was really heavy on meats. But of the meats, shrimp was really good and scallops was really good. And this is supposed to be really healthy for you. Okay? Then I learned about all the negative things about those foods and how they're unhealthy for you. And I was like, I'm not getting this, okay? And this is why. You have a list, God, of things that you don't want me to eat, and I'm hearing because they're not healthy. And yet donuts is not on the list. So I'm like, if you want us to be healthy, then why don't you put donuts on the list? Or things fried in oil that's the bad oils, rather than the good oils. Why aren't those on the list? And so I was like, Lord, why? Why can I not eat bacon? Why do you want me? I wasn't talking about any of you. Why do you want me to not eat bacon? And I heard something. You know what I heard? Because it grosses me out. I was like, what? Because I didn't make that for you to eat. So then I had to go back to the whole idea of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Was I going to be the one who was going to make the determination of what was food and what was not food? Or was I going to allow him to make the determination of what was food and not food and then live that way? And I opted to do that. So for me, it was much more a matter of obedience and melding of my heart and understanding than it was a matter of health benefits, although I believe that eating biblically has tremendous health benefits, but I believe you need to think about donuts. and not eating very many of those. Okay, very many. Hardly ever. Sugar. Halibut's on the good list. You can eat it because it has fins and scales. Yeah, yeah. No, but if you look at it, these scales are very, very, very small, but they are scales. So you can look it up. Maybe. Yeah. Halibut is not a pure scavenger. Halibut is more of a eating. Eats a lot of different things, right, David? Hunting other animals. Yeah. Fish. Oh yeah. Yeah. So they're not just like eating all the garbage that's on the bottom of the ocean, like catfish. Catfish are out. They're not on the list. So, and halibut, you guys go look it up and make your own determination. I love salmon better than halibut. I'm a salmon guy, but gator, oh, don't do that to me, Dave. Gator's on the bad list, but oh my. Okay, moving on down the list. Unable to smell, making additions, crippled foot, meaning having damaged walk. Okay, and you can read the rest of these. I want to go somewhere else real quick because we don't have much time left. Look on your notes on 6, because you have in chapter 23, which is in our reading, you have a whole chapter about God's holidays. All right, and in the very beginning of this chapter, you read, Adonai said to Moses, tell the people of Israel the designated times of Adonai, which you are to proclaim as holy convocations, are my designated times. Okay, a couple of things about that matter a lot. One is what I heard sometimes when people learn that I'm going to do Passover, although that's not as big a deal as it is anymore because a lot of Christian churches are beginning to do it, which is awesome. But what you would hear is, are you Jewish? I'd say no. Then they'd ask them, why are you keeping the Jewish holidays? They're not Jewish holidays. Says it right here. He says, these are my designated times. In other words, God says, these are my holy days. Okay? So what do? Well, around here, we keep those holy days. There are 7 of them and Shabbat. Okay? It begins with the day of the week, okay, which happens to be the 7th day. Then you go into the days of the year, the annual holidays, and how many of those are there? 7. Wasn't that interesting? And from the beginning of the first holiday of the year, Passover, to the end of the last holiday of the year, Sukkot, how many months are there? 7. Okay? Bam! It ought to be like God's blazing a neon light, all right, about how these matter and how He wants us to remember these. Okay? So we, as a community here, are learning how to do them. And we do it a little bit different every year because every year we learn a little bit more. People get worried about doing them right or doing them wrong. I'm like, well, you don't need to worry about that. Just learn. Just begin with just doing it. Well, how do I do it? How do I do Shabbat? Don't work. Okay, well, what is work? Well, now you got to figure that out, which is work. figuring out what is work and what is not work. What is the work that God means? Okay, these are all things that you can explore in the next year. Now, the amazing thing about these holidays, if you want to use that word, okay, the Hebrew word is moed. A moed is an appointment. Okay? If there's more than one of them, they're moedim. Moedim. So these moedim all tell the amazing story of the gospel in using your hands and your eyes and your taste and your smell in certain days throughout the year. So when you teach them to your family and your children, they're learning the gospel in the calendar, which is amazing. Okay? It's like, I can't believe that I never saw this. And then when you do, you're just like, oh my goodness. Okay, so it begins with Passover, which is a remembrance of when Israel was delivered. What's another word for delivered? Saved. Okay, redeemed. When Israel was delivered out of Egypt by the blood of the Lamb. I've heard that before, right? Okay, so they were delivered out of Egypt by the blood of the Lamb. On the calendar, you're at Passover. All right? Then there's another day right in the midst of that. There's like three of them, bam, 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 right in a row. One of them is Passover. The next is unleavened bread, which is 7 days of not eating any leaven, okay, and getting the leaven out of your house. Why would I need to get the leaven out of your house? Well, leaven is representative of sin. So you're getting rid of all that, all right? And then there's first fruits, which is when they would take the beginning of the harvest of barley, and they would raise the beginning of it up before Yehovah, giving thanks for the produce, all right? But as they're doing these and keeping these, they don't realize that Yeshua died on Passover. He was put in the ground during unleavened bread, and he rose again on first fruits. So if you really want to practice the Bible day of resurrection, what is it? First fruits is the day of resurrection, okay? Then, 50 days later, was the what was known as Shavuot, all right, which was another harvest festival. All of these are related to agriculture as well, but it was another harvest festival when, looking back, when Torah was given on the mountain. And when Torah, God's word, was given on the mountain, it was given with fire and loud noises, okay, and a rumbling, a mighty shaking. And so every year they would celebrate that day till you get to the second chapter of Acts, when they are celebrating that day, and there's another fire, and there's another noise, and there's another shaking, if you will, of where they are, and once more Torah is given, but now it is written on the hearts. Okay, so on the original Shavuot, Torah is written on tablets. On the Acts Shavuot, Torah is written on the hearts. Okay? Then you get to the next big holidays, which are in the fall of the year, which begin with trumpets, which was like an announcement. God's about to do something. We're gonna make an announcement. We're gonna blow. Literally, the commandment is make a loud noise. So if you don't know what to do and you get to that day and you haven't read about it or nobody's taught you what to do on that day, just wake up and go, Make a loud noise. Okay? Can you imagine if millions, if not billions of everybody on earth on that day made a loud noise? What would happen? Yeah, right. Okay? And it's no accident that Paul, the Jewish rabbi, wrote on the last trumpet. This is what's going to happen. What does he mean? He means the last day of trumpets, because trumpets was an announcement of something amazing that was happening. By the way, Yeshua was most likely born on trumpets. The announcement is made. There's a loud noise in heaven. He's born. Okay? The last trumpet will be when he comes back. The last trumpet. Okay? Then you move from there into the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur, which is all about judgment. Judgment and forgiveness. Judgment and renewal. It was a day when Israel was judged and cleansed from their sins for the whole year. And then the last holiday of the year is a 7-day holiday known as tabernacles or booths, or in Hebrew, sukkot. And that's a day when you're supposed to build a hut or something that you don't normally live in and go live in it for 7 days. Now, this is really hard to do in Alaska. It's not impossible. Was it last year or the year before? 2 years ago, I put my my little RV trailer in the back lot back there, and we began with several others, and we were going to camp all during that week. And it was October, and the temperature was going boom. And by the end of the week, I was the only one left. Right? Some people had to work. It snowed. That's right. It snowed, and then there was mud, and I was like, no, I'm staying. Okay? The point is not whether or not you go out and live in a hut. The point is remembering that when Israel dwelt in temporary dwellings in the wilderness, all right, God was with them. And it's all about when God tabernacles among us and lives among us, so you can see how that's the last festival or the last moed of the year. Okay? So it's the gospel. Yes, Kathy. Okay, that's a really good question. Is it? You mean Shavuot. Passover's always the same day, but not always same day of the week. Correct. And he wasn't raised on that day. He was raised on the third day after being in the grave, and the next day was the first day of the week. So he had already been raised. So when Mary got there, he was already not there. Okay? And that week, probably most likely, he would have been put to death on Wednesday. Okay? Put in the ground Wednesday night. Okay, so he's in the ground Wednesday night and all day Thursday, which is one day. He's in the ground Thursday night and all day Friday, which is the second day. He's in the ground Friday night and all day Saturday, which brings you to Saturday night, which is the end of Shabbat. And he raises. And then Sunday morning they get there and he's not there. Yep. So, okay, well, that's enough for tonight. Enjoy the notes and reading the notes, and go home and get some rest. My goodness. Bless you to get great, quiet, good rest tonight, that you may be alive and well and awake in the morning in whatever you're doing. Amen. Amen.